Okay, so today we're going to talk about consciousness. This is probably like step one in this discussion on spirituality, really. Because until you understand consciousness, or at least start to question and try to probe consciousness, it's hard to talk about it. And I think science has actually done an extremely poor job of talking about consciousness because in most scientific contexts, all of consciousness exists because of the brain. And that is it. The brain is the source of consciousness, and it works more like the motor of an engine where, when the engine is running, it's producing something, right? It's making you go, it's producing thoughts, all these things. So today we're going to explore a different branch of that, exploring, well, what does consciousness look like if we actually consider how weird it is to be human? And there's a meditation at the end of this that we'll do to really demonstrate that. But first, why don't we just have a brief conversation about what is consciousness? Like, what do you think it is? How did you experience this reality? How would you define it? Does anybody have any thoughts, opinions on that matter?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Can consciousness exist without a brain? Can there be a consciousness or a thing like consciousness without a brain, or is it like only something that has a brain, That way you can understand what consciousness is.
See,
does it have to have like a living being tied to the brain and then that's consciousness, or can there be consciousness without like a body?
Yeah.
So, that's exactly my point, right? In pursuit of consciousness, you have to first define that term. Consciousness. What does it mean? How do we look at it?
Right.
Science has said it must be in the brain because if you kill somebody's brain, consciousness goes away. Or if there's brain damage, they stop functioning. Therefore, they must not be conscious, right? So consciousness must not exist if the brain is damaged. That's our idea. But in stating that, it means that all other scientific inquiry is thrown out the window, right? You don't actually know. You have a hypothesis that the brain is the thing that produces consciousness for each individual person on this planet, right? If you have that hypothesis, then, oh yeah, sure, it's all in here. We'll just look at the physical wiring and all this stuff.
Yeah.
But, and we'll get into this more, but it's so much weirder than that because if you put it into that box, it makes sense, right? You can say, okay, the brain produces consciousness. But the minute that you start to allow that box to kind of unfurl, you'll start to see that it is a lot weirder than you think. Because, okay, we have assumed this hypothesis that it starts with some kind of biological basis. But what if that assumption is wrong? What if we assume the opposite? What if we assume that all things are conscious? All entities. Right? If we think plants have consciousness, animals, insects. What if even this table itself had some form of consciousness, but it obviously can't talk, it obviously can't say anything, it can't move, it doesn't have those structures, but that does not necessarily mean that the same energy that flows through us that allows us to speak and gives life to us does not also flow through this thing.
It definitely does, because that table's always off. So, seriously.
Right? So this is a fundamental problem, and this is something that we've talked about throughout this whole class. Language is the issue. Because the minute that you say consciousness, you have to define it. But by defining it, you have to make assumptions. It is this, it is not this. It is this, it is not that. And you put it into a box. Once you have a nice box for it, now you're going, okay, let's explore inside this box. But what if you fucked up and the box is bigger? What if it is much bigger? And what we'll explore tonight, what if it is infinite?
Is there an analogy to like the physical world, like Earth and the universe, and
Yeah.
like how like humans thought this was it, like this was heaven and earth and everything in between, what we see, and then, you know, we found out we live on a globe, and, you know, it's
Yeah.
one of the heavenly bodies, and, you know, you got
Right.
like solar
Yeah,
systems.
Millions and millions.
It's the same
millions.
thing,
So
right?
is that like, is
We
that-
think we are the center of all
Right.
things. And now we know demonstrably that we're not, right? We can explore the universe and realize like we're just a tiny speck among a billion other specks among trillions of other specks. But we've made a lot of assumptions. And some of those assumptions have been wrought through spiritual pursuits. So, for example, you know, Christianity in its early phases would downplay scientific inquiry, right? There are many early philosophers and scientists that were killed because they opposed religion. Their view opposed religion.
Even Galileo.
Galileo.
Which is not really like a religious thing, you know?
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
I
He
think
was just
Jupiter-
like, no, we're not the
Jupiter
center.
seems to have moons, you know, like, you know, the things are spinning around Jupiter, and that was going against church doctrine, that, you know, that's going against, you know, the notion that everything revolves around Earth,
Yeah,
you know, because Earth is the center, and that's how, you know, the world goes around man, or, you know, we're in the middle, or it's just theology, right? And the science didn't seem to reflect their view on the world, the way the world should be based on scripture. And, you know,
Yeah.
that's like, you know, to get into a different thing, but because of that, Galileo was like ostracized, you know, like it's going against what we think, you know,
Yeah.
we think, and, you know, this is science. And so they're like, it doesn't matter, we just can't endorse it, you know.
yeah. So,
Going back to your, oh, go ahead, sorry.
no, it's okay. Go ahead.
I was going back to your meaning of consciousness.
Yeah, okay.
So, I think that it would be like, when they say somebody's unconscious, it means like they're not thinking, or like that term. I would think that consciousness would be the awareness of the environment around you.
Awareness. Okay.
I think that consciousness is like the awareness of like yourself about you, like your
Ego. So, yeah.
ego self, like everything in here. That's like being aware of you as a human being.
Okay. Yeah. So being aware of the body,
Yeah, of the self.
being aware of the self, being aware that you are in this thing.
Being aware that you're aware, I think is consciousness.
Yeah.
Okay. Being aware that you are aware. Okay. So we really like awareness. I like that.
Or consciousness to me is see, feel, and hear. Versus unconsciousness, which those senses aren't there, but you can still have emotions and feelings and dreams and things that are going on subconsciously.
Okay. Well, let's summarize that as awareness of senses.
Yep.
Right.
There you go.
When you feel stuff, because things happen to your body that you don't feel, right? I'm sure we've all had a cut, bruise, something. You get in the shower and you're like, ow, what? Where did that come from? You know, or you know, you're rubbing your arm and all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, where did this bruise come from? Yeah. Right? Things happen to this body that you are not aware of, that actually hit your sensory system. And at some point, it probably was going to go, hey, look at this. Hey, pay attention. We just bumped our elbow or whatever. But it wasn't important. And so awareness was never really brought to it. All right, what else we got?
It just reminded me, there's like thousands of things that are probably happening to the human body every second that we're just not aware of. And we're not supposed to be, right? Like the heart's beating, and, you know, like your digestive system's working, and blood's traveling, all of that. That's just supposed to happen, but it's when things get out of control or there's pain that your attention draws to it. Like something's wrong, pay attention, you know?
Yeah.
But if it's a sharp pain, like you're on the ground crawling, then, you know, it's more than a little, hey, pay attention. It's like, you know,
So let's
you
wake
go,
up.
Yeah.
Let's focus
You go
on
to
that
the
for just
hospital.
a
Oh my
second.
God.
Yeah.
Right?
So, isn't it interesting that when something happens to your body, awareness is brought to it? That, to me, is one of the most intelligent aspects of our system. That is communication at its highest. It is saying, yo, we got a cut. You need to pay attention to this so that we can get this fixed, resolved. We need to patch it up. We need to make sure there's no infection. Like, that's what the body is doing for consciousness. So again, when we're thinking about consciousness, like an awareness of the body, it's interesting in how it interacts. Because it has to say, hey, consciousness, become aware of this. Instead of it being somewhat instantaneous. Right? If you were the body itself and it was cut, that would have to be, you would be feeling all the things all the time. Yeah.
Another thing I think describes the consciousness is not just being aware, but also being present in your consciousness. Like, you can have like a consciousness that's like your brain is doing a million things, but to me, consciousness is like a place in your, that all the things going on where you're present. Like, and you're able to like be where you are.
Yeah. Well, you can be unconsciously conscious, right? We've all done that. We've all probably been in the car where you drive somewhere and you're like driving, you get onto the highway, and next thing you know, you're like in your work spot. You pull up in front of the building, and you're like, shit.
I get here.
Yeah, I missed like 3 lights, like 2 right turns and a left turn. I don't remember doing those things, right? So you were conscious and unconscious at the same time.
I don't know if you were conscious then. If you weren't, I guess you were because you had to carry that.
Yeah.
So that's an autopilot. That's basically like an autopilot.
Yeah, the different divisions of consciousness. Okay, so before we go any further, let's watch this first video because it will kind of explain. I think it does an interesting job explaining this phenomenon, and then we can talk about it a little more and see if this helps or hurts our understanding of consciousness. Use this back, please. All right.
The quality tools you need at the prices you deserve.
It is consciousness. Chaitanyam. The word is Chaitanyam in Sanskrit or Chit. Chaitanyam, Chit, these are the words used. And what he says is, there is a consciousness in you. This is Chaitanyam. And you have a mind, and you have a body. This consciousness shines in the mind. And through that, in the body, in all the organs of the body. And you feel this consciousness. This is the answer. Now the answer here is, the thing to be noted here is, the teacher presents consciousness in 5 aspects. 5 points you have to understand, appreciate. First of all, consciousness is not a part of your body or your mind. Consciousness is not a part of your body or your mind. It is apart from your body and mind. Here it's different from science. Because modern science would say consciousness is a product of your body. Even your mind is a product of your body. Mind and consciousness all are products of the brain. That's what physiology would say today. But here the teacher says consciousness is apart from your mind and body. First point. It is not a part of your body. It's not a product of your body. Second point. It's apart, but it pervades and illumines the mind and body. Consciousness pervades and illumines the mind and body, enabling it to function. Third point, this consciousness is not limited by the mind and body. It exists apart from the mind and body also. It's not limited to it. It's not something here in this particular brain, in this part of the body. It's not limited by the body. Third, this consciousness is known, it is known in the functioning of the mind and body. Through the functioning of the mind and body, we can know consciousness, we can experience consciousness. And the fifth, the last point to be appreciated is, without the mind and body, consciousness is still there, but it cannot be known. It's not experienced. Example, 5 points. I'll give you an example. There is light here from these tube lights, there's light here. Here is my hand. And light is being reflected from this hand. Okay, it's being reflected from this hand. The light which is being reflected from this hand, you can see here, the light being reflected from this hand, the light is not a part of this hand. It's not a product of this hand. Okay, first point. The second point is, it pervades the hand and illumines the hand. Third point is, I can understand the light. The third point is, it exists. It's not limited by the hand. Other than the hand also it exists everywhere. And the fourth point is, it's by the reflection in this hand that I can understand the light. Just now here I cannot understand the light. But when I put my hand here and it shines, I can understand the light. I can experience the light, where it is reflected. And the last point, very interesting, is if I remove the hand, the light is still there, but it's not experienced. Now it's experienced. Now it's not experienced.
I have a 134 IQ.
Okay. I like that because it's very simple. It's not complicated. Science makes a lot of things, I think, far too complicated than they need to be. But what was brought up for you guys? Anything new?
Is he saying our awareness of the light on the hand is consciousness?
I want it to be an experience.
Yeah.
But
No,
he's saying
he's
it's always
saying-
there. but
Well,
you
he
can't
was
see
using
it.
as a reference light, as a consciousness. So he basically used it as a metaphor. So right? So when we're talking about consciousness, he was saying that there are different ways to experience, right? Right now there's light all over in this entire room. But you can only see the light when it hits an object. It's reflective, right? So you can see my hand only because there's light reflecting off of it, giving it its form, its shape, its dimension, right? And so he's saying that, maybe think of it like this, like the sun itself is consciousness. Pretty much every indigenous belief system and early spiritual system revolved around the sun gods, right? Sun gods are pervasive across like every continent on the planet, that they believed that the sun was God, right? We even have like those kind of, I don't know what to call them, analogies of sorts with like the Bible, right? The Son of God, Son, right? But the sun itself, we have classified as an object. It is this, it produces this kind of energy, and it's not conscious, right? We have termed it unconscious. But what if it were conscious? And what if the energy it produced, what if it's just energy? Energy that produces consciousness. And so it shines its rays onto the earth and it produces life, or at least gives sentience to life, or some kind of collaboration between the cellular structures on this planet and its energy form, until they form some kind of symbiosis, plant life, right? Plants literally harness the power of the sun, and they feed everything on the planet. Everything comes from plants. So, thinking about consciousness in that way, right? So, like the sun shining on us, it illuminates us. It gives us depth and and form and all those other characteristics. And so what he's saying though is that just because the form disappears does not mean that the consciousness disappears, right? If you know, it doesn't matter where we're at in this room, the light is pervading everywhere, right? But you can't like tangibly see the light until there's an object that reflects it, right? You can see the different dimensions of like this, for example, because now there's a shadow here. You can see that the shadows on here. It gives it its form. So, does that make better sense?
That does. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Well, I learned like when he said that it's consciousness is not part of the mind or the body. Like I didn't think that there was a separate. Like in the beginning of it,
Yeah.
drew that thing where it looked like a sun, and then the mind, and then the body. So like he said that that was your consciousness, then your mind. So basically, it lives outside. That's what I was seeing. You know, like,
Yeah.
that's what I got from that.
Yeah,
Which is
that's what we were just talking about.
Yeah.
The sun is
yeah, it's
consciousness.
like it's weird how he separates all three pieces.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't know. Just found that weird.
We are like the observer of our thoughts. Too,
Yeah, that's true. So you're like a third person. You're just
Yeah,
sitting back.
consciousness. How weird is it that consciousness is separate from our mind and our body? You know?
In my head, it is.
I know,
I
I
never
know.
even thought of it that
Yeah.
way. You know what I mean? It's
kind
like
of spooky to just
Yeah,
think
this
about
is
it.
that's
Yeah.
more of an Eastern. It's actually a very pervasive Eastern understanding of consciousness. Like all of the East, you know, like India onward, has this kind of understanding of consciousness. It's been in the West that we have been like, no, that can't be, because coming from Christian principles that push west, the belief that there was a single God and he created these bodies, and these bodies were for a specific purpose to do specific things, and all the, you know, that creates a different understanding of what you're experiencing. Versus, if you, I mean, think of it this way. If you believe that there's a judgmental God that's going to send you to hell, and if you don't do X, Y, and Z, how does that change how you interact with the world compared to somebody that believes, oh, consciousness is everywhere and in everything. And when I see another person, I'm just seeing a reflection of myself. And when I bow, I am bowing to the goodness within that person. How does that change all of your interpretation of the world? From a God that's watching you and making sure you do the right things to you are everything and you are trying to be better. It changes how you walk through this world completely. What else we got? So,
Is it like, well, how I'm seeing it, like, so there's consciousness, and then there's conscious function, and then like a conscious reaction, kind of broken down. So like, back to the sun and overall like spirituality, elements that we cannot see and communicate with visual aspects maybe, rather than kind of like feeling. And then there's the reaction maybe of consciousness, like the actual, what we do when we sense those things or we see those things, and the action of consciousness, of us choosing to do something based on that spirit and energy, kind of. Like, is that?
So you're saying like it's broken up, there's many kinds?
No, I'm just trying to like see it in my mind, like try to understand it.
okay, yeah. So here, let me see if I can help. Maybe not directly answer your question, but I think this may add to your understanding. So that, anyways. So when I think of the body, like I had this question last year, and I've been playing with this idea for a while. But when I think of the body, and actually how it's structured, because we have somewhere, if I remember correctly, around 100 million human cells in our bodies. 100 million human cells. but we have about a billion viral cells and a billion bacterial cells, and we have 100 million fungal cells, and we have hundreds of thousands of parasites, all on this organism that we call a body. An interesting fact is that roughly 1 million microbes can fit on the tip of a pencil. So on this pencil, 1 million organisms could reside. And so you quite literally are a universe, just as vast and expansive as our own universe. And I like to think of the body as what I call it, it's a structure through which all things can communicate. All things meaning plants, meaning other people, other organisms, your human cells, your bacterial cells, because we now know that the bacteria in your gut actually have a direct connection to the brain to be like, hey, we should eat this, or we should, do that, or hey, this is making us feel weird. Like, when you get in that certain situation, you're like, oh man, this person's like I feel really weird around them. You feel it in your gut, right? That's bacterial communication. And so all these things are happening all the time. And so it's, so to get back to your question around consciousness, I think that there are multiple layers to it. And I don't know if science will ever get to really understand consciousness, especially if they just think that it's a human cellular thing. But if you think about it like an antenna through which things are communicating, and we'll get into this in the next video too, but like an antenna that allows, like a radio, we'll say it's like a radio, that's receiving information from other organs. Like, it only has one speaker, right? So it can't play like all the channels at once. It has to play each channel at a time. And so sometimes you can listen to the bacterial channel, which is like, hey, we feel weird about this person, or we're craving sugar, right? That's a thing that happens. Actually, I was having a conversation about addicts needing sugar after you quit alcohol, but alcohol itself is pretty much like sugar. And so you populate your gut with microbes that like sugar. And so when you stop drinking alcohol, you crave sugar because those microbes still reside in your gut, and you have to go through a process of kind of cleansing those out. But there's also, the human communication part, right? You get a cut. Your body's like, yo, this is happening. Hey, pay attention, right? That's like the human cells working together to say, hey, consciousness, this is what's happening. But what if there's other things that communicate too, like plants? Plants communicate via smell. A lot of insects communicate via smell. We all communicate via smell. We're just not super aware of it, but we're all giving off pheromones of some kind. And all this is happening. So I believe that consciousness to some degree resides in all of those layers. How they interact to create like a focal point for us to experience, anybody's guess. But that's kind of how I see the stages of consciousness. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah.
Or at least give clarity to it?
Yeah, that does.
Okay, great. Joe.
So, once that if there's a consciousness, or neurons, I don't know where it comes from, can it die? Or is it just always there?
Well, that's the question that we're exploring, right? Because science would say, currently as we know it, if somebody dies, their consciousness dies.
But then the earth will eat your body, and then it's like, well, then the worm's eating you, and those little atoms being absorbed under there are still alive, kind of, right?
Yeah. Nothing
Like conscious reaction.
really dies, right? Everything is recycled. Like, I was actually talking with Sam about this earlier because I was watching this interesting video about trees, and they were saying that trees actually, like how they're set up, like the right side of the tree feeds or is fed by the bottom left root system of the tree. and the right side of the tree is fed, or the right side of the tree feeds the top left part of the tree. So it flows down and to the side, down and to the side, which makes sense when you think about like we're on this spinning, wobbling globe, right? And it's trying to get nutrients down. Like you can't just go straight down because it doesn't work that way. So everything fractals out, and it fractals out in this pattern. So if you ever look at a tree, the tree is like this, where it comes out and comes out, right? That's how most tree systems are structured. Some trees kind of have deeper root systems than others. Some are taller and have less spread. But in general, that's what happens. It spreads out, spreads out. And that's probably just a factor of physics in how you can get nutrients to all those places on the spinning, wobbling globe. I forgot where I was going with that.
Yeah.
Oh, and so one of the interesting things I found about that is that, trees are dropping their leaves, right? We just had that frost come through, and all the plants are like dying, decaying, all of it's falling down. And it's fascinating because that's intentional. Once those leaves get ground down, the microbes get to them, it's just turned to soil, worms come through, ants come through, everything mixes it together. They mix it, they exchange it, they poop it out, and the root system takes that in and builds itself again. And so one of the things I think that we do that's probably not the best for our trees and plants is we clean up all those leaves, we rake them. But in doing so, all of that nutrient is lost. And
we pump it with Miracle-Gro instead.
Huh?
We pump it with Miracle-Gro instead.
Yeah, and then you get a liquid form, which is not the same thing, right?
Right.
It does not carry the microbes, it doesn't carry the same structures, and similar to our body, there's probably elements of that are incredibly important for root systems and animals and insects and things like that.
It's like when we were in Yellowstone Park, every however many years they have a fire there, and they're like, we want to prevent these fires, but there's only, with these fires, opens up the pods of certain seeds of trees that grow without heat. So they need the fire to continue the tree growth. I mean, but it's not great for everybody else that's trying to build there or whatever.
Yeah.
For us.
Yeah. But they said there's a kind of pine tree that grows there that relies on those fires for new growth. Like it might kill the old trees, but then the new pods that have fallen to the ground can only be activated by the heat of the fire.
Yeah.
Wow.
Right, so it's not great for us. It's
not great for our consciousness,
but for theirs.
But also, like, think about animals also, like, building their homes and stuff there, then you get the space, and then somewhere else.
Yeah.
Dominant.
But these trees also, I looked at the structure of these trees, and they aren't really structurally sound to live a long time, because they're like really skinny and full on top. And like, you know how normally tree rings grow in the tree? These don't. These are like just sticks. And like if there's a heavy wind, it's, and they need new trees. It's bizarre. Yeah, they're not super sturdy.
Yeah. So, and there's a term for that too. It's pyro something. I keep forgetting the name of that. I was thinking about it, but yeah, sequoias do that too. There's actually quite a lot of trees that do. But also when that does happen, it looks awful for a while, but all that dead wood, all the dead trees actually fertilize everything.
Yes.
And then everything, like it just starts growing like crazy. Like plant life will grow, new trees will grow.
Super symbolic to like when people go through huge changes. It's like you gotta make room for the new. You gotta sometimes shit's gotta burn down so you can rebuild.
Absolutely.
So nature does that. We do that.
Yeah. Well, and to think that we're not nature is one of the biggest problems.
Yeah.
Right?
It's all a big cycle.
Evolution.
Yeah.
But you still need to be responsible with your fires.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's not safe. Go burn down some forests.
The bear's still important to
All right. Let's go to the next video then, because this will add a little bit more color to this. This is a video by Graham Hancock. similar kind of philosopher to like Alan Watts, who we've listened to quite a bit, but
Tom Opal
yeah.
drove 200 miles on only 2 gallons of gasoline.
Royal Raymond Rife claimed he could heal.
And you know, that leads me to ask, what is death? Our materialist science reduces everything to matter. Materialist science in the West says that we are just meat, we're just our body. So when the brain is dead...
Sorry.
What language is
That's
Russian or
Greek.
Greek?
Why it's in Greek? That is a good question. So weird. Okay. now we can.
And that's the end of consciousness. There is no life after death. There is no soul. We just rot and are gone. But actually, many honest scientists should admit that consciousness is the greatest mystery of science, and that we don't know exactly how it works. The brain's involved in it in some way, but we're not sure how. It could be that the brain generates consciousness the way a generator makes electricity. If you hold to that paradigm, then of course you can't believe in life after death. When the generator is broken, consciousness is gone. But it's equally possible that the relationship, and nothing in neuroscience rules it out, that the relationship is more like the relationship of the TV signal to the TV set. And in that case, when the TV set is broken, of course the TV signal continues. And this is the paradigm of all spiritual traditions, that we are immortal souls, temporarily incarnated in these physical forms to learn, to grow, and to develop. And really, if we want to know about this mystery, the last people we should ask are materialist reductionist scientists. They have nothing to say on the matter at all. Let's go rather to the ancient Egyptians, who put their best minds to work for 3,000 years on the problem of death, and on the problem of how we should live our lives to prepare for what we will confront after death. And the ancient Egyptians expressed their ideas in transcendent art, which still touches us emotionally today, and they came to certain very specific conclusions, that the soul does survive death, and that we will be held accountable for every thought, every action, every deed that we have lived through in our lives. So we better take this precious opportunity to be born in a human body seriously and make the most of it. And in these inquiries into the mystery of death, the ancient Egyptians weren't just exercising their imaginations. They highly valued dream states, and it's now known that they used visionary plants like the hallucinogenic blue water lily. And it's interesting that the ancient Egyptian tree of life has recently been identified as the Acacia nilotica, which contains high quantities of DMT, dimethyltryptamine, the same active ingredient that we find in ayahuasca.
Nice.
Now, it's difficult to imagine a society more different from the society of ancient Egypt than our society today. We hate visionary states in this society. In our society, if we want to insult somebody, we call them a dreamer. In ancient societies, that was praise. And we have erected huge apparatuses of armed bureaucracies who will invade our privacy, who will break down our doors, who will arrest us, who will send us to prison, sometimes for years, for possessing even small quantities of psilocybin or substances like DMT, whether in its smokable form or in the ayahuasca brew. And yet, ironically, DMT is, we now know, a natural brain hormone. We all have it in our bodies, and it's just that its function remains unknown for lack of research. And it's not as though our society is opposed in principle to altered states of consciousness. I mean, billions are being made by the unholy alliance of psychiatrists and big pharma in overprescribing drugs to control so-called syndromes like depression or attention deficit disorder in teenagers. And we have a love affair in our society with alcohol. We glorify this most boring of drugs, despite the terrible consequences that it often has. And of course, we love our stimulants, our tea, our coffee, our energy drinks, our sugar, and huge industries are built around these substances, which are valued because of the way they alter consciousness. But what all these approved altered states of consciousness have in common is that none of them contradict or conflict with the basic state of consciousness valued by our society, which I would call the alert, problem-solving state of consciousness, which is good for the more mundane aspects of science. It's good for the prosecution of warfare. It's good for commerce. It's good for politics, but I think everybody realizes that the promise of a society over-monopolistically based upon this state of consciousness has proved hollow, and that this model is no longer working, that it's broken in every possible sense that a model can be broken, and urgently we need to find something to replace it. The vast problems of global pollution that have resulted from the single-minded pursuit of profit, the horrors of nuclear proliferation, the specter of hunger, that millions every night go to bed starving, that we can't even solve this problem despite our alert problem-solving state of consciousness. And look what's happening in the Amazon, the lungs of our planet, this precious home of biodiversity. The old growth rainforest being cut down and replaced with soybean farms so we can feed cattle, so that we can all eat hamburgers. Only a truly insane global state of consciousness could allow such an abomination to occur. And
Billionaires don't just influence politicians, they vote. That's why I take
Good timing. Good timing.
campaign contributions. In the Senate, I'll ban billionaires from making unlimited secret donations. I'll stop members of Congress from trading stocks and I'll raise taxes on
Wait
those
30
stocks
seconds.
to fund tax
Yeah, you gotta wait
I'm
to see
Dave
if...
Talarico, and I approve this message because our government should
Oh, sorry.
It sounds like all the bad shit they were just talking about. Right there. Oh yeah. Double, triple fry. Wow.
Speak of the devil.
Yeah.
At this point, you're probably not going to
I did back an envelope calculation during the Iraq War. It seems to me that 6 months expenditure on the Iraq War would have solved the problem of the Amazon forever. Would be sufficient to compensate the peoples of the Amazon so that no single tree ever needed to be cut down again to garden and look after that amazing resource. But we can't make that decision as a global community. We can spend countless billions on warfare, on hatred, on fear, on suspicion, on division, but we can't get together the collective effort to save the lungs of our planet. And this is perhaps why shamans from the Amazon are now mounting a kind of reverse missionary activity. When I've asked shamans about the sickness of the West, they say it's quite simple. You guys have severed your connection with spirit. Unless you reconnect with spirit and do so soon, you're going to bring the whole house of cards down around your heads and ours. And rightly or wrongly, they believe that ayahuasca is the remedy for that sickness. And many now are being called to the Amazon to drink ayahuasca, and ayahuasca shamans are traveling throughout the West, offering the brew, often under the radar, often at personal risk, to bring about consciousness change. And it's true that the message of ayahuasca, the universal message, is about the sacred, magical, enchanted, infinitely precious nature of life on Earth and the interdependence of material and spiritual realms. And it's impossible to work with ayahuasca for long without being deeply and profoundly affected by this message. And let's not forget that ayahuasca is not alone, that it's part of an ancient worldwide system of the targeted, careful, responsible alteration of consciousness. It's recently been shown by scholars that the kykeon used in the Eleusinian mysteries in ancient Greece was almost certainly a psychedelic brew, that the soma of the Vedas may well have been a brew based upon the Amanita muscaria mushroom. We have the DMT in the ancient Egyptian tree of life. We have the whole global cultures of surviving shamanism, and what it's all about is a state of consciousness that's designed to help us find balance, harmony. The ancient Egyptians would have called it mart with the universe, and to remain mindful that what we're here to undertake on Earth while immersed in matter is fundamentally a spiritual journey aimed at the growth and perfection of the soul, a journey that may go back to the very origins of what made us human in the first place. And I stand here invoking the hard-won right of freedom of speech to call for and demand another right to be recognized, and that is the right of adult sovereignty over consciousness. There's a war on consciousness in our society, and if we as adults are not allowed to make sovereign decisions about what to experience with our own consciousness while doing no harm to others, including the decision to use responsibly ancient and sacred visionary plants, then we cannot claim to be free in any way. It's useless for our society to go around the world imposing our form of democracy on others while we nourish this rot at the heart of society and we do not allow individual freedom over consciousness. It may even be that we're denying ourselves the next vital step in our own evolution by allowing this state of affairs to continue, and who knows, perhaps our immortal destiny as well.
Okay. So a little different perspective on consciousness. And all the points made very real in the 1 minute of advertisements. So, what do we think? Anything come up?
Shit, we really aren't free, huh? Democracy and our form of our all of the what's supposed to be right is implemented universally, then we're still repressed. I hate that reminder. So why go be free more? Well, I like to do some drugs.
I think that they're trying to repress our consciousness because they know what they're doing is wrong, and if we're more aware or hyper aware of what's going on in the world, then they can't continue to do those things. Or if a lot more people were more aware or hyper aware of what's happening in the world because they are conscious, the world might not be what it is and what it's becoming.
Yeah. Well, and he talked a little bit about some of the tools that they use too, right? They push alcohol.
Yeah.
Right.
They allow it, knowing it kills thousands.
And they don't allow
Mushrooms.
mushrooms, DMT, you know,
LSD, yeah.
mushrooms in
MDMA.
certain places, like all those things, like
Mhm.
those are the ones that they don't want you to have because those are the ones that wake up your consciousness.
Yeah, because, well, we already talked about this, but we kind of define consciousness as awareness, right? What those substances do is allow you to become aware of things that you have not been aware of.
Right.
And that is not good. Like, I mean, the reason that all these substances are illegal is precisely for that reason. In the 50s and 60s, there was a huge use of them because they were free at the time, right? They weren't illegal. And so people were using them a lot, and it shifted everything. Their war in Vietnam was met by mass protests everywhere, right? They had like the Summer of Love and all that stuff, where people were high and out in the fields and just preaching love, connection, unity. That's not good for a war in Vietnam that feeds the pockets of billionaires.
Yeah, but that's big pharma also, they wanna keep you sick. So like that stuff is good and it.
Smash burger.
Yeah.
Right? They want you to eat that because it keeps you in the same cycle. Again, what does that do? That fucks up your microbial population. And to what extent they really understand this and are using this as levers, I don't know. But for sure they understand that these foods are addictive, they're simple, they're very cheap to make, and they're absolutely terrible for your body. And they will break your body at some point in the future if you continue to eat them. It's inevitable. You know, it could be now, it could be 10 years from now, it could be 30 years from now. But at some point, eating those foods will dysregulate your system. But that's part of the process, right?
Everything's intentional.
Yeah. How do you get back to a hospital? Everything runs through hospitals and insurance companies. Well, you just keep people sick, eating garbage, drinking garbage that pulls them from their bodies. The thing that you absolutely must have to experience any form of divine communication, of connection to the source, God, whatever you want to call it, has to come through this body. But if you are poisoning the body, how could it ever speak to you? Right?
No.
Even in the Bible, which, I don't like to evoke too much religion in here, but even in the Bible it talks about keep your body is a temple. And on that I would absolutely agree. It is. And if you're putting things into it that disrupt that or that muddy that temple or that antenna, let's say it's an antenna or a TV box, whatever you want to call it, and you're muddying the signal now you're not receiving consciousness as clearly as you could. And so you are not hearing the message as clearly. But that's if you believe that consciousness can be experienced outside of the body, right? If not, then why does it matter? I'll just do whatever to this body. It doesn't matter. I'm going to die anyways, whatever. All right, what else? Sorry, I'm still firing.
I guess the other question I have, I think you kind of confirmed that consciousness never disappears. Where does it start? Where does it come from?
The wave. Consciousness soup. I'm sorry.
Where does is there individual consciousness or was just one consciousness? Those questions. I have a lot of questions.
Well, so he was talking about the Egyptians quite a bit. The Egyptians had this concept of ma'at. He briefly mentioned it, but essentially ma'at is so think of it like water, right? Water is in a lot of things, right? But you can't always see the water. And consciousness is like that in everything, right? So it's not necessarily that you have your own, but that your antenna is receiving it in a way that nobody else's does.
Like in the water concept, I'm my own drop in the body.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, or a wave. In the Buddhist tradition, they would say we are an ocean. Consciousness is an ocean. Each one of us is a wave, right? Okay. You can see the wave as separate and distinct only because of the light that gives it shape, form, dimension, all of that, right? But at some point, that wave crashes and becomes no more wave, and it goes back into the ocean, right? To be the same thing. And it makes sense to me because life is a bunch of repeating patterns. Everything repeats in different forms, right? So why we think that we're special and not being part of that repetition is what I would ask, right? We can't not be nature. We are part of it. And if all of nature works in this way, why doesn't the human body? What else we got?
I've done my best, people.
Have you gone through or taken ayahuasca?
I did take ayahuasca.
And how was the experience afterwards? Were you able to? You can only tell as much as you want to, but how was it? Was it literally feeling reborn? Were you able to let go of things?
So everybody has a different experience.
Yeah.
My experience, I did it in 2018, actually, after I was very suicidal.
Wow.
I tried to take my life. My dad took the gun from me.
Thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
Yep.
Me too. And so in my desperation, I had heard about ayahuasca, and so I flew down to Ecuador and went out to this really remote-ass town in the middle of nowhere, hiked 20 minutes down this path to this retreat that had no electricity at all. Awesome. And I spent a week there and did, I think, 3 ceremonies with them. And in none of those did I have a hallucinatory experience.
Wow.
My experience involved lots of diarrhea and vomiting.
I heard that too,
Yeah. But again, so this is why I think it's important to really understand your body as a structure through which things communicate, right? If it can't be communicated, there might be so much mud in there that's been dirty, dust, laying for years that in order to receive anything, you have to clear it out, right? And so while I didn't have like some of the transcendent experiences that people I was with did, because they're like, oh yeah, we saw Aya and she told me this and all these things. What I got from it, I don't know where their journeys took them, but I think what I got was just as important, if not more important. Because I got back to the United States and I could not eat American food anymore.
Wow.
Like, I couldn't. The first time I went out and I had a burger, I got so nauseous, like so nauseous. I laid on my couch for like 3 hours, feeling like I was gonna throw up. And I have not eaten a burger since.
That's actually amazing.
So,
honestly, it is.
Yeah, it is. It truly is
How do you
amazing.
take it? Is it you smoke it? Do you
No, it's a tea.
Drink.
It's a tea.
Is it from a tree?
It is.
That's what I was thinking
It's
about
from
the-
2 different root systems.
The only
Two
way
different trees.
you can have Aya and the help expand our consciousness or whatever is from that tree, so it must have its own consciousness to be part of us, so we're like experiencing it all.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.